Hello, Dragon Slayers. This is Dr. Tom back again. I've been out for about a week, coincident to a computer crash. Uh, this is going to be the first of two parts. We'll be joined later by my biblical scholar cousin Michael. But today I want to talk about heroic living, embracing life, the role of God in that life, and the role of fellowship. So this is a very personal story. Years ago, I was fortunate enough to attend both undergrad and medical school at the University of Michigan. For those of us who grew up in the Midwest, Michigan was something of a mecca. It was the go-to medical school for people in Detroit, even as far west as Chicago, uh, and as far east as I recall, the Ivy schools, and in particular Toledo, Ohio. What do we have in common? Well, this is part of the extension of the Motown empire. And the story I'm about to tell you is a reflection of the brotherhood and sisterhood that emerged from that empire. So understand that having graduated from the university, many of us went our separate ways. But by fortune, sometime around 1980, the subject of the first part of the talk today, Dr. Malcolm Bacchus, an incredibly handsome man, looked like the body double of Omar Sharif, and his lovely wife, Kim, emigrated from Wisconsin to set up a neurology partnership with Charlie Cagliari and a few others. Why is this important? Well, it's important because these were physicians of excellence. We were all schooled in a tradition, well taught at Ann Arbor, that our mission was to serve others. It was a gift, and our primary goal was to do well in hopes that by doing well, we would do good. 10 years later, I came late to this fraternity as a psychiatrist in 1990. I knew very little of the brotherhood then, but as time went on, because I was a Michigan graduate, the charismatic couple, Malcolm and Kim, would invite me to various Michigan events, for example, when we were in bowl games. They were very accessible, a delightful, charming couple. Obviously, they enjoyed the good life, and they had two wonderful children, Alex and Jessica. Well, it was very difficult to have access to a neurologist as well regarded as Mel. And with time, it was equally difficult, I suppose, to have access to me. So among the Michigan fraternity, we had a code, and the code was Go Blue. So if we wanted to refer somebody to a doctor who had a pretty long queue, we would ask the office manager, just tell Dr. Bacchus that Dr. Bittker is calling and tell him Go Blue. Well, it so happened that I had a very dear friend, a judge, who was about to embark on a journey to Morocco, and I was wishing him well. And as we were discussing things, he acknowledged that he was feeling some pain and weakness in his legs, and he was planning to consult a neurosurgeon. Well, given my gifts for multiple choice exams and the equivalent of medical trivia pursuit, I almost intuited that my friend was suffering an attack of a very potentially life-endangering problem called Guillain-Barré syndrome. So I said to him, hey buddy, I'm your big brother. Let me fast track a referral to a friend. I proceeded to fast track a referral to Malcolm, and Malcolm confirmed my diagnosis, referred my friend to another colleague who put him on an antibody regimen, and within a month to 6 weeks, my friend was back to full health. Later, when we were celebrating his recovery, and I was something of a transient hero to our friendship network, people were coming up to me to congratulate me and how astute I was. And I remarked, well, I'm hardly a fashion plate. And when I cook, several people would prefer that they not take a second helping, but I'm absolutely bitching at multiple choice exams, and I got this one right. And then I acknowledged, you know, I only wished I had waited about a week because he can still outdrive me off the tee. So that's the story of that. And I later went on to appreciate the value of our fraternity and our fellowship. Unfortunately, about 10 years ago, Mel, virtually at the peak of his career, suffered a fall, which led to a cascade of events, which meant that his cognitive functioning deteriorated precipitously. But the important part of this story is that his devoted wife, Kim, and his family stood by him through all of this. And it was that level of devotion that I also wish to celebrate. Mel's end game was not a good end game, but the heroism displayed by his family was quite remarkable. Yesterday, I had the good fortune to attend Mel's celebration of life. The celebration filled a rather large church in our community, as well as the parking lot. I was struck by how many brothers and sisters were in attendance. And I remarked to myself how important this support system, this brotherhood and sisterhood was to us all, and how we came together to celebrate a hero. During that service, we all learned new things. We learned about Mel's charm, his devotion to his family, his passion for fine wine, his delight in living fully. It was a reminder to all of us how to live well. So as we take inventory of ourselves, think about your lives, think about your path, think about where God fits in that. And Mel was keenly interested as a neurologist in the afterlife. Indeed, the minister who presided over the celebration of life spoke often of that. I spoke to a friend about this, and I hope Michael will join us later, but he was commenting about burning bush moments. We all have burning bush moments, as is Moses in his communion with God, that compel us to respond to the challenge. We either don't measure up or we measure up, and we summon the heroic potential within us in order to measure up. And I would say to Mal, to Kim, to Alex, and Jessica, that you all measured up heroically and answered the call. With that, we'll pause, think about Mel's memory, and I will be back soon to talk further with my co-host, Michael. My co-host for this, Michael Dallen, attorney, biblical scholar, progressive activist, and a man of many, many talents. I'm showing you a copy of our books, Dragon Slaying and the Rainbow Covenant. If you want to support the podcast, take a look at these books, and if they interest you, spend a few pennies and advance our cause. Should you wish to sponsor this podcast, you can do so by emailing drtom.author@gmail.com. Well, Michael, how are you? What's been going on in your life?
Thank God, all kinds of things, Doctor. Lot going on. We're working on a new website, but the website designer is on her way to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. She left today, so we have that going on. But she's this should be promising. And we're resurrecting a lot of our articles um, for our website. So we're working on our website. Um, we have some very good articles. Um, one is one that I'm particularly in love with. I did not write this. It's Dr. Israel Eldad, who wrote The Temple Mount on Fire. And he was talking about the utility of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem for the world, for non-Jews. That this is a place for them to focus their attention, um, and through it to find redemption. So lots of heavy cosmological concepts that are very rational and make a lot of sense. Has nothing to do with Kabbalah, but does have a lot to do with the basic scheme of the universe. So I'm looking forward to having that back up and some of our other stuff.
Michael, I wanted to share with you a very powerful experience I had yesterday. And I talked about it on my solo podcast a little earlier, but your perspective would be helpful. As you know, like me, I grew up in Detroit in the inner city and uh, was fortunate to go to the University of Michigan, which for me was something of a mecca, as it was for a lot of young people who were aspiring to become physicians. The medical school there was uh, rather significant. It drew from people in the East Coast and the Ivy League, Chicago, Ohio, and so on. And why this is relevant is that yesterday I attended a wonderful memorial service for a colleague of mine, Dr. Malcolm Bacchus. Mel also attended the University of Michigan Medical School, later went on to take a neurology residency at the University of Wisconsin, met a beautiful bride, and ultimately took his bride to Reno, where he established a rather significant presence in the community. He and his partner, Charlie Cagliari, who was his best friend, set up this wonderful neurology practice. I came 10 years later, but the Michigan connection was such that Mel and his lovely wife Kim would on occasion invite Michigan alums to various kinds of events, like a Rose Bowl party or the equivalent. Well, Mel unfortunately suffered a fall 10 years ago, and his health declined precipitously. But his family, particularly Kim, measured up to the heroic challenge, was devoted to him, and cared for him through his transition to death. Now, Mal, it turns out, had a keen interest in the afterlife. As a neurologist, he was fascinated by near-death experiences and EEGs of people who were in the midst of transition, and was something of a believer in the possibility of an afterlife, the possibility of a heaven. Well, on a personal level, I was, along with hundreds of other people, uh, in this church, hearing the story of Mel's life and hearing people come forward and echo how heroic he was. And I remarked to myself how warm and supportive the community was, and how important that was to me, and how important it was to those around me. And then I thought about something that would interest you, and that is those burning bush moments. Those moments where, if you listen carefully, the voice of God is there to talk to you, to instruct you, and to inspire you. And I had that kind of epiphany yesterday. I had that sense of warmth, engagement in the community, and gratitude. Your perspective.
You never know when you're going to hear the voice of God and who's going to be voicing it. It sounds like it was a hell of a funeral. It was a church, you say?
Yeah, it was. Well, the backstory is that Mel's father came from Assyria, was a wonderful craftsman, but also a very wise person and well read. And he established and helped build with his own bare hands and that with his friends the Assyrian church in Flint, Michigan. So religious devotion was something that was part of this family.
Okay. So they were Catholics under the Assyrian Church is one of the Pope's
Right.
national churches under Rome. I see. Um, some of my best friends are Assyrian. I remember reading Catch 22, where the hero was originally going to be in Joseph Heller's conception a Jew, but then he thought, well, no, we can't have that. We'll make him an Assyrian, and people can't be too mad about that. And I the Assyrian. Some of my best friends have been Assyrian and are today. I mean, it's a funny, odd thing to say, um, but and you can imagine both of these guys on a horse with a little iron tin pot helmet, carrying a club and a spear, and they could march all day and they could fight all day, and that's who you want for a soldier. The Chaldeans speak of the Assyrians as, well, if you don't have a donkey, you should get an Assyrian.
Ah,
But the Assyrians I've known have all been very, very bright, if not brilliant. And I in allies with the Jews against the Arabs, that um, they have not been well treated by Islam.
well, from
Yeah.
my experience, I note a resonance with the culture, that it's not that alien from what I've known.
Well, right. I mean, it is uh, a history-based culture. History matters to them, and they do what they can to keep things together. And they try to study Assyrian. You know, but actually the language they speak is Arabic generally. Arabic and here English. We'll see how long they keep their Arabic even. But um, they express, in my knowledge with them, a great fondness for Israel and for what the Jews are trying to do in the land of Israel. And they found a little bit of solace in modern Kurdistan, where they finally got a little part of Earth together where they can do what they need to do to achieve some national self determination. Pretty cool people. I remember I was in the gym with a Chaldean girl and an Assyrian guy, and explaining to a Jewish guy that these people kicked our asses, and so they did. But we're let bygones be bygones. They've changed, and we've got new rules now. Judaism has a lot to say about how to get to where you want to go, which is to stay alive. The idea with Judaism is not that you focus on your own death, your demise, and getting a little bit of pie in the sky, solace for yourself, a vivid afterlife. We kind of leave that to God's accounting. We don't know. Our effort in life is to try to make the earth a garden, to try to bring heaven to earth. I don't know any other religion that does that. We really believe that building here while we're alive, um, this earth is what we ought to be doing, and so we devote ourselves to that and figure that we'll be rewarded or not according to God's will.
I think that has a lot to do with the passion that many of our faith have for service to others.
Well, it's an inherent part of Judaism to try to bring heaven to earth. I mean, it's a life focused religion. I was picking up litter around my house, my street, and a Catholic prelate who lives across the street was out there, and he was asking me what are you doing? And I was saying, well, I'm picking up litter. I figure, it's incumbent upon us to make the world better. And he said to me, don't you think that's vanity? The idea was that you should focus on your own relationship with the ultimate, with deity, and you
And you
need to,
should not have time to stoop to pick up litter.
you don't have time. Yeah, what are you doing? That's vanity. That's ephemera. It's temporary stuff. We know, and we know it's true.
Well, I would much rather have you as my neighbor than the other guy.
You bet your ass. Can I say that? Yeah. Jews tend to make really good neighbors. I mean, we can be, of course, difficult, but we try to leave things better, and we don't expect people to, we don't go and proselytize and focus on people's souls. The Torah teaches us that your neighbor's well-being, his physical well-being, is your concern, not his soul. Let his soul find its own way. But if the neighbor is hungry or sick, that is your concern. His or her physical circumstances are your concern too, and you want people to be in good shape. The whole idea of loving your neighbor itself is incumbent upon us, and it's not just a slogan. I mean, we really mean that.
So,
Okay.
if we're going to take it from the Old Testament, one of the first and more powerful lessons in the Old Testament is indeed we are our brother's keeper.
Indeed. Well, yeah. Look at Abraham. I mean, living at this time where people were just savage to each other. They would literally eat each other alive, and Abraham is concerned about the people that, everybody knew that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were awful. They're unpleasant people. No one liked them. But Abraham is out there trying to pitch to the Almighty, can't you find some decent people to, to prevent them from being exterminated? And he went to the mat. Um, you know, Life matters. We believe in life. We don't know what happens after life. I believe with Torah, I'm not just inclined, but I'm called to believe that something wonderful happens when you transition from life to whatever follows life. That it's a marvelous thing, that it's a good thing, that justice is done. We live in a world where we have to have the metaphysics of Torah depend on justice being done after death. You know, the people who have had a bad time in life get some justice. Hitler and his minions don't go to the same place as their victims. That's just basic Torah. It's the teaching. God wouldn't be just if that's how things worked out. But we believe that God is just, and we have a promise that we recite every Shabbos as we get into the Sabbath, that one who declares, a man or woman, obviously, but one who declares and teaches that the King of the universe, that God is just, that he's yasher, that he's fair and square and does good, He's like an honest dealer. One who declares and teaches that will grow tall and strong like a cedar of Lebanon in the house of Hashem. That it is incumbent upon us to teach the world that this is how the system works. That and and to teach that God is just includes a teaching that there is something more than just this life. That something happens, something wonderful happens after life. What it is, we don't know exactly, and we're instructed not to pry. I mean, we have instructions against um, messing with the dead, auguries, and trying to bring the dead back to life. Um, through prophecy or through magic means. That's forbidden. It's something dirty. It's an evil thing to do that. We leave the dead to the dead. It's our obligation to bury well. Allow me to point out, it's a bugbear of mine that we have all these people cremating uh, each other, and that is not our way. And we teach that it shouldn't be the way for anybody. That the burial in the earth is a last act of atonement. That you suffer yourself to be put into Mother Earth, where you can nourish the earth instead of being a source of air pollution, and instead of having your carcass um, go up in in a fiery industrial process in a burning furnace. But that's not a good idea. Um, Better the gentle work of burial. We have the whole earth. I mean, we can use it. And it's a great equalizer.
The path to heaven, as you see it, obviously you invest, at least in the past 20 or more years, you've invested a great deal of yourself in the practice of your faith. One doesn't go to heaven at the snap of a finger. One goes to heaven having lived a life of discipline and prayer and faith. Is that not the case?
Tommy, we don't know the formula. If I knew the formula, do you think I wouldn't share it with you? You know,
I didn't think you were holding out. I was just wondering.
I'm not holding out. I'm giving you what I know, which is not much, but the key is that we trust that the King of the universe loves justice and righteousness, fairness, that he's fair, he's square, he's yasher. Yeshurun is the name of the to be aspired to name of Israel. Uh, Someone who is just and righteous and a square dealer. Um, but we believe in should teach that about the maker of all things, the author of creation, the ruler of the universe, and we believe that he is. We are taught to believe that he is not just transcendent but also immanent, that he's with us, that he's perfectly aware of everything that transpires in every speck and atom in existence. He knows what's going on. Um, that he's omniscient, and that he's just and all powerful. You know, I've run again and again into very very bright people who have expressed to me the idea that this God of Israel, God, is just a figment of human imagination, that he couldn't exist, and that if he did exist, he's a jerk. That he look at the horrible way that he's designed the universe with all the suffering and misery and things that are wrong in it. That's what we fight against. No, actually, I've got a gift of Baba Ganoush and who knows what else. And I don't actually want to send good old Rachel to hell, but it was a little bit of an interference with our plans. This is how we ring in Shabbos with what is the psalm? I have it here somewhere. Um, it's Psalm 25:12, I think it is. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
Okay. Well, no, that's not the one. What man is he that fears God? We're talking about fear of God, the loving fear of the Holy Father, the King of the universe. He will instruct him in the way that he should choose. His soul shall abide in prosperity, and his seed shall inherit the land. That is not it. You ask for iniquity to be pardoned because we all have iniquity, and we're reminded that all the paths of Hashem, the Lord, are mercy and truth, into such as keep his covenant and his testimonies. We have in Rainbow Covenant, I go on about this Roman centurion, a crude man, a very crude man who has spent his life as a Roman soldier. It's not a very uplifting life. It's a lot of loose women and a lot of booze, a lot of savagery, cruel punishments and things like that. And they are burning. They are making a martyr out of a sage of Israel. And the Roman centurion, in his mercy, tells the sage of Israel, "We're burning you at the stake. You can make this easier on yourself if you just take this wet wool and put it against your breast." So, accept the story. He was trying to make the sage's last minutes better. Um, and that was it. The Romans had given the sage wet wool to keep. They were burning him at the stake and trying to prolong his agony as he's being burned alive. Oh yeah, well, the Romans, they did these things, and the persecutions of the Jews by the Romans is something that the Nazis looked at to learn from. Um, and um, and the Roman centurion um, knew how to make this a shorter process. And the story is he snatched the wet wool from the breast of the sage to let the fire burn faster, and he jumped into the fire with the sage. And the story is, and through this, he and this long-time saintly scholar, gentle, lovely, justice-seeking man, the scholar of Israel, and the centurion went to the same place. So, in just a moment of virtue, of being yasher, of square and fair and decent and kindly, you can achieve the same results as the lifelong scholar and saintly man.
As we look at
Uh,
life, on many occasions we are given the heroic choice if we can recognize it.
right. But tell me about this man. You felt that he was a good doer.
He was just a rather remarkable guy. He was everything. He was a handsome dude, had a beautiful wife, tennis player, cyclist, um, gifted physician, uh, love stories, and he had a great wife and two wonderful kids. Uh, so he did his life well. He did his life heroically. And guys like Malcolm and his compatriots, I think, are people that we need to savor while they're around. We need to admire them. We need to learn from them. What does this inspire? And I was just struck by the resonance I felt with our own little community at the time of the memorial service. People of all walks of life were there. There were Jews, Christians, I'm sure.
I wouldn't step foot in that sanctuary. I wouldn't step foot in a Catholic church because they have images of deity that defame deity. They have pictures of what they believe to be gods and the heavenly court.
I don't believe this was a Catholic church.
If it was Assyrian, it was.
Well, no, but this is not an Assyrian. He was raised in Assyrian. The church was not Catholic.
Okay. Yeah, there's a Presbyterian church that I go to for funerals all the time, and they don't. The only images they have are pictures of books.
Well, this is a Presbyterian church, ironically.
Okay, well, yeah, they're normally they're not very into pictures of deity, you know, and which we fly from because it's defamatory and not to mention idolatrous. So it's not a good thing to contemplate that. I told you about having the Shrine of the Little Flower, the church that the never to be adequately damned Father Coughlin designed up the road in Royal Oak, Michigan. I've never been there. It's an architectural marvel, and I'm more willing to go inside a Buddhist temple in the Far East, you know, or a Hindu temple in India than I am in to the Shrine of the Little Flower, which I associate with great evil, and which is indeed jammed with images of deity and anti-deity, you know. And and one thing we're sure of, you cannot imagine deity. It's just impossible, you know. You cannot come up with a picture. Any picture that you come up with the King of the Universe is a picture of what God isn't, not what God is, and it's something that we don't honor. You know, we more or less ostentatiously do not go into these sorts of churches, but the Presbyterians, fine, you know, no problem. If all they have are pictures of books, you know, it's perfectly okay.
I didn't find that I was straying too far from the path by being there.
That's a good thing. Well, you went to honor a man that you had some love for, and that you admired, and a man who himself represented the best our race, the human race, can offer. Uh, so that is actually, you know, you're trying to commune with kedusha, with holiness. So, and according to you, what you got out of it was great holiness. You called it transformative. That this was something that brought you up. It was elevating.
Well, the other element I think that you might appreciate is the Michigan and Detroit ties. Uh, both
All the way
Mal,
in Nevada, yeah.
both Mal and I shared a love for Motown music, uh, and University of Michigan football team. In fact, he was so busy, and I was reasonably busy too, that the password to get a patient to jump the queue if you really wanted
Yeah,
somebody to see him was
yeah,
Go Blue.
right. Well, tell me, I mean, does that also include the obligation to abominate Ohio State, or can you just
No, I think
ignore that?
I think in that sense we're a little bit more chivalrous than that. We respect our adversary, and
Okay, well that's the way to go.
yeah.
That's a famous rivalry that kind of transcends any common sense. I went down to Columbus not long ago.
Oh,
Um, I never been there before. Very interesting town. Um, it's a town where you have all these Jewish millionaires have given over. They seem to be some of the leading characters, and they've created auditoriums, sports facilities. Wexner and I forget the other guy who built up Columbus. And it's just like Ann Arbor. It's like a small Ann Arbor, you know. Um, and I'm told that they do some good work there. So
I
so there you have it.
I respect Big Ten institutions. I, I think I'm grateful that I had a state university that educated me for pennies compared to what it costs these days.
Well, it does cost a lot. I see the license plates all over the place. That I have a son, or I have a daughter at the University of Michigan. Send money, you know.
So,
I I, I was at the Weissenthal Center, not the Weissenthal Center. Who was the first president of Israel? I forgot the name of the guy. There is a major, uh,
Chaim Weitzman.
the Weitzman.
Yes.
Thank you. Bless you. Yeah, the Weitzman Center in Israel. I not that long ago, a couple of years, I was there. I'd spent the morning in a Bedouin village, which was just a decrepit, lousy place, like like a crumbling, like a slum, a
Uh-huh.
very unpleasant kind of slum. Where the women were talking about marriage. They offered us black coffee. They were saying their coffee without sugar was bitter, like marriage, and that was their regard for marriage. And there were these fly blown donkeys, and leaking pipes all over the place. The Saudis had established a new mosque or two, and they were broadcasting the muezzin's call, automatically to these people who were not responding too much. But there it was. And then just a few miles up the road, I'm at the Weitzman Center, and it was like going from the 16th century into the 21st century, or maybe the 22nd century. And it reminded me of Ann Arbor, because that's what I know in terms of academic places, except this was right around Christmas time. It was the winter solstice. There were all these pretty girls walking these streets. Everything was built on sand, and you had blooming date palms and blooming flowers all over the place here, and they were doing just the most wonderful cutting edge work in technology and deep scientific research. And it was like a different planet from the Bedouin slum. Um, and it was a pleasure. I was with somebody from D.C., from Washington, D.C., who was saying that the displays that she was seeing here at Weitzman were beyond anything that she'd ever seen at the Smithsonian or in the wonderful museums that we've got in Washington, D.C. They were something. Um, and all built recently on sand, on a sand dune that just wasn't very prepossessing. They'd gotten donations from World Jewelry. They'd had the Wexners from down in Columbus, and I don't know who from Ann Arbor, and from South African jewelry and Russian jewelry. And it took, only a world people like the Jews could have supported something like this. And the money came from all over to advance something that we believe in, which is making this world better. Um, and 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 this is a core feature, and not just a core belief, but a feature of the Jewish people. And we believe that it helps give other people the idea that this is the way that they should go too.
This really
Folks,
provides a wonderful coda on this podcast, you know,
making the
to,
world better.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Michael, once
Well,
again, th-
instead of saying that it's all vanity, that it's mere vanity to pick up the trash.
no, I've never felt terribly vain, either raking leaves or picking up trash.
No, no,
I thought it was good, wholesome work. And
yeah,
I think one of the signs of youth as you age is the capacity to bend at the waist.
There's that too. Yeah, worked for Katharine Hepburn.
Okay.
She used to go around New York City and picking up trash. She says it's the best exercise. It's really good for your
She
waist.
was actually a force.
Yes,
I,
she was, of course.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you run into these people like that, and they help make life worth living. But
Well, as some of the audience may know, I'm a student of film, and I the early Hepburn Cary Grant films were just wonderful, including one in particular entitled Holiday, where both of them, people may not uh, know this, but Cary Grant began as an acrobat, and Katharine Hepburn was, I believe, an Olympic class diver. And in the film Holiday, they're both doing somersaults in the hallway.
for real.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
really.
Okay. Well, I think you kind of have to deserve Cary Grant and Hepburn. You know, I mean, you just don't get them uh, gratuitously. You have to earn it. You know, you have to be able to appreciate it. But they were both great. I remember this wonderful story about Cary Grant, this modest, wonderful man, and Irving Berlin had to call him over a deal. You know, there was some kind of show business that they had to cover. They're both living in New York, but Irving Berlin called, or Cary Grant was in L.A., but Irving Berlin had to call Cary Grant, and when the conversation was over, we find in somebody's biography, biography, that when it was over, Irving Berlin turns to his wife and brags, "I was just talking to Cary Grant." And in L.A., Cary Grant speaks to Diane Cannon, his wife, and I was just talking to Irving Berlin. And it's important as we go through life to be able to appreciate these wonderful people that we encounter.
He was a remarkable guy. Uh, they did a film about Cole Porter. Night and Day was the film. And I believe Grant sang and played at the piano. Uh, One of the wonderful stories I know of him was that one of his later romantic films, sort of, was Charade, which he had done with Audrey Hepburn. And the story is of a woman who is, I think, separated or divorced from a husband, and there's a very intriguing plot where all these evil dudes, including Walter Matthau and James Coburn and a few others, were trying to find out what was hidden of great wealth that she had. But
Giants,
what?
wonderful, giants. Walter
Yeah.
Matthau, James Coburn.
Anyway, so the movie begins with Audrey Hepburn basking on the balcony of some ski slope. Picture this, and it's a resort, obvious, a place where people are kind of cooling off after skiing, and Cary Grant is standing there looking at her, and he is standing in the way of the sun, and she remarks to that he is in her way, and he seizes upon that as an opportunity to chat her up and says something to the effect of, "Well, what brings you here?" And she responds, "Well, I'm in the process of getting a divorce." And Cary Grant's immediate rejoinder, apparently he thought of it himself, he says, "Well, I hope it's not on my account."
Wonderful repartee.
Yeah, he was great. When I was a kid, being the boy geek, and my one great skill was probably academic and multiple choice exams and such trivia. I didn't know how to charm ladies, and so I I studied Cary Grant movies.
I know. Treat them rough. That was not actually a good method. It bewildered the hell out of me. It didn't work. I noticed.
Well, once again, I'm so delighted to have you with us. And until next week, be healthy, be well.
I mean,
You're not traveling, are you? Or are you?
I'll tell you about it. No, not imminently. I'll tell you about it later.
Later. All right, my friend. Be well, cousin. Goodbye.
Shalom. Shalom.